My name is Margaret Henderson, and I'm 58 years old. 6 months ago, I thought I was helping my son Derek by moving into his home to care for my twin grandchildren. Today, I'm standing in his kitchen, holding the broken pieces of my grandmother's china plate while my son screams at me like I'm a stranger who just committed murder. "Get out of my house." Derek's voice echoes through the room, his face twisted with rage that seems way too intense for a simple accident. My hands shake as ceramic fragments cut into my palms, and I can't understand how breaking a plate during dishwashing has turned into this nightmare. Just as I'm about to apologize again, my phone rings. Before we dive into this incredible journey of betrayal, family secrets, and ultimate justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're ready for a story that proves sometimes the people closest to us can become our biggest enemies. Subscribe for more real-life stories that will shock you, and let's get started because what my lawyer told me during that phone call changed everything I thought I knew about my own son. Let me take you back 6 months before that terrible day with the broken plate, when everything seemed so different and my son Derek appeared to be the caring family man I'd always believed him to be. It was a cold February morning when Derek called me, his voice heavy with exhaustion and desperation that immediately triggered my maternal instincts. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore," he said, and I could hear one of the twins crying in the background while his wife Amanda's muffled sobs came through the phone. Derek explained that Amanda was struggling with severe postpartum depression after giving birth to the twins, Emma and Ethan, and the medical bills combined with Amanda's inability to work had created a financial crisis that threatened to destroy their family. He painted a picture of sleepless nights, overwhelming responsibility, and mounting debt that made my heart ache for their situation. "We might lose the house, Mom," Derek confessed, his voice breaking in a way that reminded me of when he was a little boy coming to me for comfort after a nightmare. Without hesitation, I offered to help however I could, but Derek's request went far beyond what I expected. He asked me to sell my house and move in with them, using the proceeds to help with their mortgage while providing full-time childcare for the twins. It would solve everything, Derek insisted. Amanda could focus on getting better, we could save the house, and the kids would have their grandmother's love every day. The proposal seemed like a perfect solution that would benefit everyone involved. The decision to sell my house wasn't easy because that little 2-bedroom home had been my sanctuary for 23 years after Derek's father died. Every room held memories of holidays, birthday parties, and quiet evenings spent reading in my favorite chair by the window. But the thought of my son losing his home and my grandchildren suffering because I was too selfish to help made the choice inevitable. Within 3 weeks, I had accepted a below-market offer from a cash buyer Derek recommended, eager to resolve their crisis quickly. The house sale netted $87,000 after fees and closing costs, money I split between paying down Derek and Amanda's mortgage and establishing what I thought would be a joint household fund for expenses. Derek seemed overwhelmed with gratitude, constantly thanking me and telling Amanda how lucky they were to have such a generous mother and grandmother. Amanda, still struggling with depression, managed weak smiles and occasional hugs that made me feel like I was truly making a difference in their recovery. Moving into Derek's house felt strange at first because I had to adjust from being an independent homeowner to becoming a guest in someone else's space, but I was determined to make it work for the sake of my family. Derek and Amanda gave me the basement bedroom, explaining that it would be quieter for me and closer to the laundry room where I'd volunteered to help with household chores. The room was small and had only one tiny window, but I decorated it with my favorite furniture and photographs to make it feel more welcoming. My daily routine quickly centered around caring for Emma and Ethan, 2 beautiful babies who became the light of my life during those early months. Feeding them, changing diapers, reading stories, and watching them discover the world around them filled my days with purpose and joy that I hadn't experienced since Derek was small. Amanda seemed genuinely grateful for my help, often commenting on how much calmer the babies were with me and how my presence allowed her to rest and begin therapy for her depression. The first red flag appeared about 6 weeks after I moved in, when Derek started implementing what he called house rules that seemed designed specifically to limit my freedom and comfort. He insisted that I ask permission before using the kitchen after 8 p.m., explained that certain areas of the house were family-only spaces where I shouldn't spend time, and requested that I keep my personal belongings confined to my bedroom to maintain the house's organization. When I questioned these restrictions, Derek became defensive and claimed he was just trying to establish boundaries that would help everyone coexist peacefully. Amanda's behavior also began changing in ways that made me uncomfortable, particularly her secretive phone calls that she'd quickly end whenever I entered the room. She started spending hours locked in the master bedroom, claiming she needed alone time for her mental health, but I could hear her talking animatedly with someone about topics that didn't sound like therapy or depression support. When I offered to take on more childcare duties so she could have additional rest, Amanda became almost hostile, insisting that she needed to maintain her connection with the babies and didn't want me taking over her role as their mother. The most troubling discovery came when I realized that Derek had been intercepting my mail, claiming he was helping by organizing all household correspondence in his home office. When I asked to see letters from my bank and Social Security Administration, Derek assured me that everything was fine and that he was handling any important financial matters as part of our family arrangement. His explanation seemed reasonable at the time, but something about his reluctance to show me the actual documents made me increasingly uneasy about the situation. The morning that changed everything started like any other Tuesday in late August, with me getting up early to prepare bottles for the twins while Derek and Amanda slept in after another night of what sounded like heated arguments coming from their bedroom. Emma and Ethan had developed a routine of waking around 6 a.m., and I enjoyed those quiet morning hours when the house was peaceful and I could focus entirely on their needs without feeling like I was being watched or judged by their parents. After feeding the babies and getting them settled for their morning nap, I decided to tackle the pile of dishes that had accumulated in the sink from the previous night's dinner. Derek and Amanda had a habit of leaving their plates and cooking utensils for me to clean, something they'd never explicitly asked me to do but had come to expect as part of my contribution to the household. I didn't mind the extra work because it felt like a small way to earn my place in their home and show appreciation for their willingness to let me live with them. The plate that would soon become the center of a nightmare was actually one of my own family heirlooms, a delicate china piece with hand-painted roses that had belonged to my grandmother and had been passed down through 3 generations of women in our family. I had given it to Derek years earlier as part of a set when he first got married, thinking it would help him establish his own family traditions and connect his children to their heritage. The plate held tremendous sentimental value because my grandmother had told me stories about painting those roses herself as a young bride, trying to create something beautiful for the family she hoped to build. As I carefully washed the antique china, my hands were slightly wet from the soapy water, and the plate slipped from my fingers despite my best efforts to catch it. The crash seemed to echo through the entire house as the precious heirloom shattered into dozens of pieces across the kitchen floor, and my heart immediately sank with the realization that something irreplaceable had been destroyed through my carelessness. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the broken fragments and feeling genuinely devastated about losing such an important family treasure. Before I could even begin cleaning up the mess, Derek came thundering down the stairs with a level of rage that seemed completely disproportionate to the situation. His face was flushed red with anger, his eyes were wild with fury, and he started screaming at me with language and tone I'd never heard him use before. "You clumsy, destructive woman," Derek shouted, pointing at the broken china as if I'd deliberately smashed it out of spite. "That plate was priceless, and you destroyed it because you can't even do simple dishes without screwing up." The verbal assault continued for several minutes while I tried to apologize and explain that the accident was completely unintentional, but Derek refused to listen to anything I said. He called me worthless, senile, and a burden that he should never have agreed to take into his home. Amanda appeared in the doorway wearing a smirk that suggested she was enjoying my humiliation, and she joined Derek's attack by claiming that I was becoming too much of a liability to continue living with them safely. "You're going to pay for that plate," Derek demanded, his voice shaking with rage. "That was worth at least $500, and since you broke it, you're responsible for replacement costs plus damages to my kitchen floor." His demand for payment seemed absurd because the plate had originally been mine, and accidents happen in every household, but Derek was treating the situation like I'd committed a deliberate act of vandalism against his property. The situation escalated when Derek announced that I would need to start paying monthly rent if I wanted to continue living in his house, claiming that my presence was causing too much stress and expense for his family to continue supporting me for free. Either you start contributing real money to this household, or you need to find somewhere else to live, Derek declared with cold finality. I'm not running a charity for clumsy old ladies who destroy valuable family heirlooms. The cruelty in Derek's voice and the calculated nature of his demands made me realize that this wasn't just about a broken plate but represented something much more sinister happening beneath the surface of our family dynamic. Amanda's satisfied expression and her immediate agreement with Derek's harsh ultimatum suggested that they had discussed this scenario before and were using my accident as an excuse to implement plans they'd already made regarding my future in their home. Later that afternoon, while Derek was at work and Amanda was supposedly napping, I overheard our neighbor Mrs. Johnson talking to her husband about the screaming match that had disturbed their morning coffee. I felt so sorry for that poor woman, Mrs. Johnson said. Derek was yelling at her like she was a criminal instead of his own mother, and over what sounded like just a broken dish. Her words confirmed that Derek's reaction had been extreme enough to shock people outside our family and made me realize that other people could see how inappropriate his behavior had become. That evening, I made a devastating discovery when I found Derek's laptop open on the kitchen counter with browser tabs showing research about local nursing homes and assisted living facilities. The websites he'd been viewing specialized in budget elder care with titles like Affordable Senior Housing Solutions and Low-Cost Memory Care Options. Seeing those pages made my blood run cold because it meant Derek had been planning to get rid of me long before the plate incident provided him with an excuse to justify his actions. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I overheard Derek on the phone later that night, speaking in hushed tones about someone who was finally showing her true colors and becoming more trouble than she's worth. He was describing me to someone as if I was a problematic tenant rather than his mother who had sacrificed her own home and financial security to help his family during their crisis. The realization that Derek had been systematically planning my removal while accepting my money and care for his children felt like a betrayal so deep that I barely slept that night. The morning after Derek's explosion about the broken plate, my phone rang at exactly 9 a.m., and the caller ID showed my lawyer's office number in a way that immediately made my stomach clench with anxiety. Robert Chen had been handling my legal affairs for over 15 years, ever since my husband's death, and he rarely called unless something serious required immediate attention. His voice sounded unusually grave when I answered, and he asked if I was somewhere private where we could discuss some urgent matters regarding my recent property sale. Margaret, I need you to sit down because what I'm about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear, Robert began, his professional tone carrying an undertone of anger that I'd never heard before. I've been reviewing the paperwork from your house sale, and there are some serious irregularities that suggest fraudulent activity has taken place. The words hit me like a physical blow because I couldn't imagine what could be wrong with a transaction that had seemed so straightforward and beneficial for my family's emergency situation. Robert explained that during a routine review of property transfers in our area, his office had discovered that my signature on several key documents didn't match the signature samples they had on file from my will and other legal papers. More troubling was the discovery that someone had filed a power of attorney document claiming authority to handle my financial affairs, a document I had never signed and had no knowledge of until that moment. Margaret, I believe your son Derek has committed several serious crimes involving elder fraud and identity theft, Robert said with careful precision. The scope of Derek's deception became clear as Robert detailed how the fraudulent power of attorney had been used to expedite the house sale and redirect the proceeds in ways I had never authorized. Instead of the simple family arrangement I thought we'd made, Derek had legally transferred ownership of my former property entirely into his name through forged documents that gave him complete control over my assets. You don't actually own any part of that house anymore, Margaret, Robert explained. Derek has stolen your property through legal fraud. Even more shocking was the discovery that Derek had been systematically draining my Social Security payments and pension deposits for months before I even moved into his house. Robert's investigation revealed a pattern of unauthorized electronic transfers that had been redirecting my monthly income directly into accounts controlled by Derek, leaving me with just enough money for basic personal expenses while he accumulated thousands of dollars that legally belonged to me. We're looking at potential felony charges for elder abuse, financial exploitation, and identity theft, Robert said grimly. The conversation took an even darker turn when Robert revealed that Derek had used my stolen money and property as collateral for additional loans and credit lines that I was now legally responsible for despite having no knowledge they existed. Margaret, your credit has been severely damaged by debts Derek incurred in your name, Robert explained. If we don't act quickly, you could be facing bankruptcy and homelessness while Derek benefits from crimes he's committed against his own mother. As Robert outlined the legal options available to me, I struggled to process the magnitude of Derek's betrayal and the calculated nature of his theft. This wasn't a desperate son making poor choices during a family crisis, but a predator who had systematically planned and executed a complex fraud scheme targeting his own mother's financial security. The loving son who had begged for my help 6 months earlier had been an act designed to gain access to my assets and establish legal control over my resources. There's more, Margaret, Robert continued with obvious reluctance. My investigation indicates that Amanda was fully aware of these activities and may have actively participated in the fraud. Bank records show that she was present during several transactions and signed documents as a witness to your supposed consent. Learning that my daughter-in-law had knowingly participated in stealing from me while I cared for her children and supported her recovery felt like a second devastating blow to my faith and family loyalty. Robert strongly advised immediate legal action to recover my stolen assets and pursue criminal charges against Derek and Amanda, but he warned that the process would be complicated and emotionally difficult. These cases often turn into family wars where the victims face intimidation and manipulation designed to make them drop the charges, Robert explained. Derek and Amanda will likely claim you're mentally incompetent or that you willingly gave them authorization they can't locate. Are you prepared for that kind of battle? The decision to fight back wasn't easy because it meant acknowledging that my own son had deliberately destroyed my financial security and betrayed every trust I'd placed in him. But the alternative was accepting Derek's theft and allowing him to continue exploiting me while I faced poverty and homelessness in my retirement years. I want to pursue every legal option available, I told Robert with growing determination. Derek chose to steal from his own mother, and he needs to face the consequences of his crimes. As our conversation ended, Robert outlined the immediate steps we'd need to take, including filing police reports, securing restraining orders, and beginning the process of recovering my stolen assets through both criminal prosecution and civil litigation. Margaret, I want you to be very careful about discussing this with Derek or Amanda before we have legal protections in place, Robert warned. Desperate criminals sometimes become violent when they realize their schemes are being exposed. That evening, I sat in my basement bedroom surrounded by the furniture I'd thought represented a new chapter in my family relationships, now knowing that everything had been built on Derek's lies and theft. The man I'd raised, sacrificed for, and trusted with my entire financial future had deliberately planned my destruction while pretending to love and need me. The realization that I was essentially a prisoner in the home of criminals who happened to be my own children made me understand that my real fight for survival was just beginning. The morning after my devastating conversation with Robert, I woke up feeling like I was living in a spy movie where everyone around me was playing roles they'd rehearsed while I remained completely unaware of the script. Every interaction with Derek and Amanda over the past months suddenly took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of their deliberate fraud, and I began recognizing manipulation tactics that had been invisible when I trusted their motives were genuine. The third betrayal revealed itself when Derek's sister-in-law Sarah called me around lunchtime, ostensibly to check on how I was adjusting to living with Derek's family. Sarah worked as a customer service representative at the local bank where I'd maintained my accounts for over 20 years, and her friendly conversation gradually steered toward questions about my recent financial transactions and whether I was satisfied with the assistance Derek had been providing with my banking needs. Something about Sarah's tone made me suspicious enough to probe deeper into her knowledge of my financial situation, and her responses revealed that she knew far more about my private banking matters than any relative should. Derek mentioned that you'd given him power of attorney to help manage things during Amanda's recovery, Sarah said with practiced casualness. I'm glad you have such a caring son to handle the complicated paperwork for you. Her assumption that I'd willingly granted Derek financial control confirmed that she'd been actively involved in facilitating his access to my accounts. When I directly confronted Sarah about her role in Derek's fraud, her demeanor immediately shifted from friendly relative to defensive co-conspirator. She claimed that Derek had shown her proper documentation of my consent and that she'd only been trying to help our family during a difficult time. Margaret, you're not thinking clearly about this situation, Sarah said with condescending concern. Derek has been protecting your interests and managing your money better than you could have done yourself. The conversation became truly disturbing when Sarah revealed that Derek had borrowed a significant amount of money against my former house without my knowledge or consent, using the fraudulent power of attorney to secure a loan that I was legally responsible for repaying. The bank required a cosigner because Derek's credit wasn't sufficient for the full amount he needed, Sarah explained as if this was perfectly normal family business. Your signature as the property owner made the loan possible. Sarah's casual admission that she'd helped Derek commit banking fraud using her position as a bank employee made me realize that their conspiracy involved multiple people and had been planned with sophisticated knowledge of legal and financial systems. This wasn't a desperate improvisation but a calculated scheme that had required months of preparation and coordination between Derek, Amanda, and Sarah to successfully steal my assets while maintaining plausible deniability. The fourth betrayal came to light when Amanda finally emerged from her bedroom that afternoon and attempted to manipulate me into accepting their version of events. She sat down next to me on the couch with the same concerned expression she'd used when discussing her postpartum depression, but now I could see the calculated performance behind her seemingly genuine emotions. Margaret, Derek and I are worried about you, Amanda began with practiced sincerity. We've noticed some concerning changes in your memory and judgment lately. Amanda proceeded to present a carefully constructed narrative suggesting that I had enthusiastically agreed to all of Derek's financial arrangements but was now confused about what I'd actually consented to due to early signs of dementia or other cognitive decline. You were so generous in wanting to help our family, Amanda said with fake gratitude. But we're concerned that you don't remember the conversations we had about the best way to structure everything legally. The manipulation reached new depths when Amanda produced a folder of documents that she claimed contained my signatures authorizing Derek's control over my finances, property, and medical decisions. The paperwork looked official and professional, but I had no memory of signing any of those documents and was certain I'd never agreed to the broad powers they supposedly granted Derek. We understand that memory issues can be frightening, Amanda continued with false compassion. But we want you to know that Derek has been protecting you from making financial mistakes that could have devastating consequences. That evening, Derek orchestrated what he called a family meeting to address my confusion about our living and financial arrangements, but the gathering felt more like an intervention designed to gaslight me into accepting their fraudulent narrative. Derek, Amanda, and Sarah sat facing me in the living room with serious expressions while presenting their unified version of events that painted me as a willing participant who was now suffering from cognitive decline that made me forget my own decisions. Derek took the lead in explaining how they'd all been working together to protect my best interests while managing the financial crisis that had threatened our family's stability. Mom, you came to us with this plan, Derek insisted with apparent sincerity. You said you wanted to help us save our house and create a financial structure that would benefit everyone, especially your grandchildren. His ability to lie so convincingly while looking directly into my eyes made me question whether I was dealing with the son I'd raised or a stranger wearing his face. The meeting took a sinister turn when they presented documents allegedly signed by me that granted Derek guardianship powers over my medical and legal affairs, supposedly because I'd requested help managing decisions that were becoming too complicated for me to handle alone. We're not trying to control you, Margaret, Amanda said with fake sympathy. We're trying to protect you from the stress of financial responsibility that was making your depression and memory issues worse. Sarah produced bank records showing the pattern of transfers from my accounts to Derek's control, pointing out dates when I'd supposedly visited the bank to authorize each transaction personally. You were so concerned about making sure Derek could access funds quickly for family emergencies, Sarah explained with professional authority. These transfers were your idea because you wanted to eliminate delays in helping your son and grandchildren when they needed support. The coordinated nature of their lies and the sophisticated documentation they'd created made me realize that I was facing a conspiracy much more extensive and dangerous than simple theft. Derek, Amanda, and Sarah had spent months creating a false narrative supported by forged documents, fake witnesses, and manufactured evidence designed to make their crimes appear like legitimate family financial planning. They hadn't just stolen my money, they'd stolen my identity and were trying to steal my sanity. The meeting concluded with Derek announcing that they'd scheduled an appointment with a geriatric psychiatrist to help me understand what was happening with my memory and to develop strategies for managing my cognitive decline. The appointment was clearly designed to obtain professional documentation of supposed mental incompetence that would support their narrative and make it impossible for me to challenge their control over my life and assets. As I sat in my basement bedroom that night, I realized that Derek and Amanda weren't just thieves but sophisticated manipulators who were actively trying to drive me crazy by making me question my own memory and perception of reality. Their ultimate goal wasn't just financial theft but complete control over my life, and they were willing to destroy my mental health and family relationships to achieve that power. The fight ahead would require me to prove my own sanity while exposing their coordinated campaign of lies and manipulation. The next morning brought an unexpected lifeline when my neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on Derek's front door asking to speak with me privately about something she'd witnessed that was troubling her conscience. Rosa Rodriguez was a retired teacher in her 70s who had lived next door for over a decade and had always been friendly but not particularly involved in neighborhood affairs. Her request to speak with me alone immediately raised Derek's suspicions, but he couldn't refuse without appearing controlling in front of a respected community member. Rosa waited until we were seated in her kitchen with cups of coffee before revealing what she'd observed over the past several months. "Margaret, I've been watching what's happening in that house, and I don't think you realize how much trouble you're in," Rosa said with genuine concern. "I've seen Derek and Amanda having conversations in their backyard about money and legal papers, and I heard enough to know they're not treating you fairly." According to Rosa, Derek and Amanda regularly discussed their financial arrangements during late evening conversations on their patio, apparently believing that their voices wouldn't carry to neighboring properties. Rosa's bedroom window overlooked their backyard, and on several occasions she'd heard Derek bragging about how easy it had been to gain control over my assets and how much money they'd obtained through what he called creative legal arrangements. "I heard Derek tell Amanda that you'd never figure out what they'd done because old people don't understand modern banking systems," Rosa reported with obvious anger. "He was laughing about how grateful you were for their help, while they were stealing everything you owned." Rosa's account of Derek's callous attitude toward my situation confirmed that his theft wasn't motivated by desperate circumstances but by greed and contempt for my intelligence. Rosa's most damaging revelation concerned a conversation she'd overheard between Derek and someone on his cell phone about plans to have me declared incompetent so they could obtain complete legal guardianship over my affairs. Derek was discussing timeline and strategy like he was planning a business deal, Rosa explained. He mentioned having documentation from medical professionals and bank employees who could testify about your supposed mental decline. The conversation had included specific details about the nursing home Derek planned to place me in once he gained guardianship, with Derek describing it as the cheapest facility that would accept Medicaid patients, where I would be someone else's problem, while he enjoyed the proceeds from selling my property. Rosa's description of Derek's cold calculation about my future living situation made me realize that his ultimate plan involved not just theft but abandonment once he'd extracted everything of value. Rosa offered to provide a written statement about everything she'd witnessed and heard, but she also suggested that I needed more sophisticated help than just her testimony to combat Derek's elaborate fraud scheme. My late husband Frank had a friend named Detective Sullivan who retired a few years ago and now helps people with legal investigations, Rosa explained. Frank always said Sullivan was the smartest cop he'd ever known, and he might be able to help you gather the evidence you need to prove what Derek has done. Frank Sullivan turned out to be a godsend disguised as a gruff former police detective who specialized in financial crimes and elder abuse cases during his 30-year career with the city police department. When Rosa introduced us that afternoon, Frank immediately grasped the seriousness of my situation and offered to help me document Derek's crimes in ways that would be admissible in court. These family fraud cases are always complicated because the criminals know how to manipulate the system and their victims, Frank explained with professional insight. Frank's first step was teaching me how to safely gather evidence without alerting Derek and Amanda to my investigation. He provided me with a small digital recorder that looked like a hearing aid, showed me how to photograph financial documents with my phone in ways that captured clear evidence, and explained legal techniques for protecting myself from further theft or intimidation. Your son has been playing chess while you've been playing checkers, Frank said bluntly. We need to level the playing field by using his own tactics against him. Under Frank's guidance, I began systematically documenting every aspect of Derek's fraud while maintaining the appearance of being a confused elderly woman who accepted their version of events. The hardest part was controlling my anger and disgust while Derek and Amanda continued their manipulative performances, but Frank reminded me that emotional reactions would only strengthen their narrative about my mental instability. Frank's investigation quickly uncovered evidence that Derek's financial problems were much more extensive than Amanda's postpartum depression and medical bills. Bank records showed a pattern of gambling losses, credit card debt, and expensive purchases that suggested Derek had been living beyond his means for years before targeting my assets as a solution. Your son isn't a desperate family man making poor choices, Frank concluded after reviewing the financial data. He's a habitual gambler and chronic debtor who planned your exploitation as a business strategy. The scope of Derek's deception became clearer when Frank discovered that Amanda's shopping addiction had contributed significantly to their financial crisis, with credit card statements showing thousands of dollars in designer clothing, jewelry, and luxury items purchased while they were supposedly struggling to pay basic bills. They were living like wealthy people while claiming poverty to justify stealing from you, Frank observed with disgust. Their financial emergency was manufactured to make you feel guilty about having savings they wanted to steal. Frank's most disturbing discovery involved Derek's research into my life expectancy and inheritance laws, suggesting that he'd been planning my financial exploitation as part of a longer-term strategy to maximize his inheritance while minimizing the time and money required to care for me in old age. Your son calculated how much money he could steal while you were alive versus waiting for natural inheritance, Frank explained with grim professionalism. He decided that immediate theft was more profitable than traditional family support. The evidence Frank gathered also revealed that Derek had been in contact with several nursing homes about emergency placement, options for elderly relatives with behavioral problems, inquiring about facilities that would accept residents with minimal advance notice and documentation. These conversations had taken place weeks before the plate incident, proving that Derek's explosive reaction had been a calculated performance designed to justify actions he'd already planned. As our investigation progressed, Frank helped me understand that Derek's ultimate plan involved not just financial theft but complete elimination of my ability to interfere with his control over stolen assets. Once Derek gains legal guardianship, he can place you wherever he wants, sell everything you own, and make medical decisions that could shorten your life, Frank warned. This isn't just about money anymore, it's about your survival and freedom. Derek's world began cracking when the legal papers Robert filed reached him at work, where his supervisor had to sign for the certified delivery of documents charging him with elder abuse, financial fraud, and identity theft. The humiliation of having his crimes exposed in front of colleagues triggered a desperate response that revealed just how dangerous Derek had become when his carefully constructed schemes were threatened with exposure. That evening Derek stormed into the house with a rage that made his previous anger about the broken plate seem mild by comparison. His face was flushed red with fury, his hands were shaking, and he immediately cornered me in the kitchen while screaming about betrayal and family loyalty, as if I was somehow wrong for reporting his crimes to authorities. How dare you go behind my back to lawyers and police? Derek shouted with spittle flying from his mouth. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay our generosity. Derek's definition of generosity apparently included stealing my house, draining my bank accounts, and planning to abandon me in a substandard nursing home while he enjoyed the proceeds from his theft. His twisted logic suggested that I should be grateful for his crimes because they'd been committed by family members rather than strangers, as if blood relationships somehow justified financial exploitation and fraud. Amanda joined Derek's attack by claiming that my legal action was tearing apart their family and traumatizing their children, conveniently ignoring the fact that their own criminal behavior had created the crisis threatening their home and marriage. "You're being manipulated by lawyers who just want your money," Amanda declared with practiced indignation. "Derek has been protecting you from financial mistakes, and now you're destroying him for trying to help." Their coordinated response to my legal action revealed the sophisticated manipulation tactics they'd developed during months of planning and executing their fraud scheme. Derek and Amanda took turns presenting themselves as victims of my mental decline and legal confusion, while positioning me as an elderly woman who'd been turned against her loving family by outsiders seeking to profit from intergenerational conflict. The situation escalated dramatically when Derek attempted to have me arrested for trespassing in what he claimed was his house, apparently forgetting that I'd contributed $87,000 toward purchasing the property that legally made me a tenant with rights that couldn't be terminated through verbal eviction threats. When police arrived to investigate Derek's complaint, they discovered that I had documentation proving my financial contributions to the household and legal standing that protected me from immediate removal. Derek's desperation became even more apparent when Amanda filed a false police report claiming that I had threatened her with physical violence during an argument about household responsibilities. The report described an incident that never occurred, complete with detailed accusations about specific threatening language I'd supposedly used and aggressive behavior that was completely contrary to my actual personality and physical capabilities. Frank Sullivan's law enforcement experience proved invaluable when police interviewed me about Amanda's accusations, because he'd taught me how to respond to false allegations in ways that exposed their implausibility while demonstrating my mental competence and cooperative attitude. Amanda's story doesn't match the physical evidence or witness accounts, Frank explained to the investigating officers. She's fabricating incidents to support a guardianship petition designed to cover up financial crimes. The most sinister escalation occurred when Derek attempted to trick me into a psychiatric evaluation by claiming that my doctor wanted to discuss medication adjustments for depression and memory issues I'd supposedly been experiencing. The appointment was actually with a psychiatrist who specialized in competency evaluations for guardianship proceedings, and Derek had provided the doctor with a fabricated medical history suggesting that I'd been showing signs of dementia and erratic behavior. Frank's quick intervention prevented me from walking into Derek's trap, and he helped me understand that psychiatric evaluations conducted under false pretenses could be used to obtain legal documentation of mental incompetence regardless of my actual cognitive state. These evaluations are designed to find problems whether they exist or not, Frank warned. Derek has probably paid this doctor to reach predetermined conclusions about your mental capacity. The fifth major attack came when Derek discovered that I'd been working with Frank and Rosa to document his crimes, triggering a vindictive response that revealed the true depths of his malicious character. Derek began systematically destroying family photographs, personal belongings, and sentimental items that belonged to me, claiming that he was cleaning house and removing clutter that was making the home environment stressful for his family. Derek's destruction of my personal property wasn't random vandalism but calculated psychological warfare designed to break my spirit and eliminate evidence of my long-term residence in his home. He threw away letters from my late husband, destroyed photo albums documenting our family history, and lost legal documents that I'd stored in my bedroom for safekeeping. Each act of destruction was accompanied by claims that the items were junk or taking up too much space that needed to be reclaimed for his family's use. The situation reached a crisis point when Derek announced that he'd sold several pieces of furniture and jewelry that belonged to me, claiming that I'd given him permission to liquidate unnecessary possessions to help cover household expenses. The items he'd sold included my grandmother's engagement ring, my mother's cedar hope chest, and an antique rocking chair that had been in our family for 4 generations. "You don't need all this old stuff anyway," Derek said dismissively. "It's better to turn it into cash that can benefit the whole family." Frank's investigation revealed that Derek had been systematically stealing and selling my personal property for weeks before I became aware of his theft, using online auction sites and pawn shops to convert family heirlooms into cash that he used for gambling and personal expenses. Your son has been running a theft operation out of his own home, Frank concluded with professional disgust. He's treating you like inventory to be liquidated for his personal profit. Derek's escalating crimes and increasingly desperate behavior convinced Frank that we needed to accelerate our legal response before Derek's actions became physically dangerous. Criminals who feel cornered sometimes resort to violence, Frank warned. Derek has already shown that he's willing to destroy your property and reputation. We can't assume he won't escalate to physical harm if he thinks it would solve his problems. The turning point came when Derek's brother Michael called me to discuss what he described as family concerns about my mental health and living situation. Michael lived in another state and had limited contact with Derek's family, but he'd apparently been recruited as another participant in their campaign to isolate me from potential allies and support systems. Derek and Amanda are worried about you, Aunt Margaret, Michael said with false concern during our phone conversation. They've told me about some incidents that suggest you might need more specialized care than they can provide at home. Michael's willingness to participate in Derek's lies without investigating the truth revealed that the conspiracy extended beyond Derek's immediate household and involved family members who were willing to sacrifice my well-being for Derek's benefit. The conversation with Michael revealed that Derek had offered his brother a percentage of my stolen assets in exchange for supporting the false narrative about my mental decline and the necessity of guardianship proceedings. Derek mentioned that there might be some financial arrangements that could benefit the whole family if everything gets handled properly, Michael said with obvious greed disguised as family concern. Frank's investigation into Michael's involvement uncovered evidence that Derek had been systematically recruiting family members and friends to support his fraudulent narrative by offering them financial incentives tied to his successful theft of my assets. Your son has been building a criminal network designed to isolate you from anyone who might help, Frank concluded. He's turned your own family against you by appealing to their greed and selfishness. The beginning of Derek's downfall started when Frank's contacts at the bank launched an official investigation into the suspicious transactions and forged documents that had facilitated Derek's theft of my accounts and property. The bank's fraud department discovered that Sarah had violated numerous federal banking regulations by processing unauthorized transfers and accepting obviously forged documentation without following proper verification procedures. Sarah's termination from the bank triggered a desperate attempt to distance herself from Derek's criminal enterprise, but her employment records and email communications provided investigators with a detailed timeline of her participation in the fraud scheme. Bank security cameras showed Sarah meeting with Derek multiple times in the parking lot outside her branch office, passing documents and discussing strategies for bypassing normal banking safeguards designed to protect elderly customers from financial exploitation. The bank investigation also revealed that Derek had attempted similar schemes with other elderly relatives, including Amanda's grandmother who had died 2 years earlier under suspicious circumstances involving substantial financial transfers shortly before her death. Your son appears to be a serial predator who targets elderly family members for systematic financial exploitation, the lead investigator explained to Frank and me during a meeting at the police station. Amanda's psychological facade finally cracked when she was confronted with evidence of her active participation in Derek's crimes and faced the possibility of serious prison time for elder abuse and conspiracy charges. During police questioning, Amanda broke down and provided a detailed confession describing how Derek had recruited her to help steal my money as part of a long-term plan to eliminate their debt and fund their desired lifestyle upgrades. According to Amanda's confession, Derek had been planning my financial exploitation for over a year before his father's death, researching legal loopholes and manipulation tactics that would allow him to gain control over my assets without triggering immediate suspicion from authorities or other family members. Derek studied elder abuse cases online and learned techniques for isolating victims and manufacturing evidence of mental incompetence, Amanda admitted to investigators. Amanda's testimony revealed that Derek's gambling addiction was much more severe than anyone realized, with debts to dangerous creditors who had threatened physical violence if he didn't repay money borrowed against expected inheritance from my eventual death. Derek told me that stealing from his mother was safer than borrowing from loan sharks, Amanda explained with shocking callousness. He said old people die quickly in nursing homes, so we'd only have to manage the situation for a few years. The most damaging evidence against Derek came from his own digital communications, which Frank had helped police obtain through proper legal channels. Derek's text messages and emails revealed a comprehensive criminal enterprise involving multiple family members, forged documents, and detailed plans for my complete financial destruction, followed by abandonment in the cheapest available institutional care. Derek's correspondence with nursing home administrators showed that he'd been pricing end-of-life care options for elderly patients with behavioral problems and limited financial resources, specifically requesting information about facilities that provided minimal medical supervision and had high mortality rates among residents. Your son was essentially pricing your death, Frank told me with controlled anger after reviewing Derek's communications. The investigation also uncovered Derek's research into inheritance law and estate planning, revealing his detailed knowledge of how to maximize his financial benefits from my death while minimizing legal complications or family challenges to his inheritance claims. Derek had consulted with multiple lawyers about asset protection strategies for elderly parents with diminished capacity, seeking advice on legal methods for transferring wealth before natural death occurred. Derek's desperation reached new heights when he attempted to physically intimidate me during a confrontation in the kitchen, where he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises while demanding that I drop all legal action against him. "You're going to destroy this family over money that you're too old to need anyway," Derek shouted while twisting my wrist. "Stop this legal nonsense, or I'll make sure you never see your grandchildren again." Derek's physical assault was the final evidence Frank needed to convince police that I was in immediate danger and required protective intervention. When officers arrived to investigate my complaint, Derek attempted to claim that I'd injured myself during a fall and was blaming him due to confusion and resentment about normal family financial arrangements. The police interview with Derek revealed his complete lack of remorse or understanding regarding the seriousness of his crimes. Derek continued insisting that he'd been helping me manage financial affairs that were too complicated for someone of my age and mental condition, apparently believing that his lies could convince law enforcement officers trained in recognizing manipulation tactics used by financial predators. Derek's arrest on multiple felony charges triggered a community response that revealed how many people had witnessed suspicious behavior but hadn't known how to report their concerns effectively. Neighbors came forward with accounts of Derek's secretive financial discussions, his disrespectful treatment of me, and his obvious resentment about my presence in his home despite his claims of wanting to help his elderly mother. The local newspaper's coverage of Derek's arrest exposed similar cases of family financial abuse in our community and prompted other elderly victims to contact police about suspicious behavior from their own adult children. Derek's case has opened the floodgates for reports about family theft and elder abuse, the detective assigned to my case explained. Your courage in fighting back has given other victims the strength to expose their own situations. Amanda's complete breakdown during a family gathering at the police station revealed the extent of her guilty knowledge and active participation in Derek's criminal enterprise. She admitted to forging my signature on multiple documents, lying to bank officials about my mental capacity, and helping Derek research legal strategies for gaining complete control over my assets and medical decisions. I knew what we were doing was wrong, but Derek convinced me that Margaret was going to die soon anyway and that we deserved her money more than she did, Amanda sobbed during her confession. Her admission that they'd viewed my death as a business opportunity rather than a family tragedy revealed the complete moral bankruptcy that had driven their criminal behavior. Derek's best friend Tom also became implicated in the scandal when investigators discovered that he'd been aware of Derek's criminal activities but had chosen to remain silent in exchange for Derek's promise to share stolen proceeds from my exploitation. Tom's betrayal felt particularly painful because I'd known him since Derek was in high school and had always considered him part of our extended family. The investigation concluded with Derek facing 7 felony charges, Amanda charged as his accomplice, and Sarah facing federal banking fraud charges that could result in significant prison time. The breadth of their criminal conspiracy and the sophisticated nature of their fraud scheme convinced prosecutors that maximum penalties were appropriate to send a message about the serious consequences of elder abuse and family financial exploitation. The legal victory came swifter than anyone expected when Derek's own communications provided prosecutors with irrefutable evidence of premeditated elder abuse, financial fraud, and criminal conspiracy that made plea bargaining impossible and trial outcomes virtually certain. Derek's detailed planning documents, including timelines for my financial exploitation and abandonment, convinced the judge that he represented a serious danger to elderly community members and warranted the maximum possible sentence. Derek received a 7-year prison sentence for elder abuse, financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy charges, with additional restitution orders requiring him to repay every penny stolen from my accounts plus punitive damages for emotional distress and legal expenses. The judge's sentencing statement specifically noted Derek's callous calculation in planning my exploitation and his complete lack of remorse for devastating his own mother's financial security and emotional well-being. Amanda received a 3-year sentence as Derek's accomplice, with the possibility of reduced time in exchange for her cooperation in asset recovery efforts and testimony against other participants in their criminal network. Her sentencing hearing included victim impact statements from me that detailed the emotional trauma of discovering that my own family had systematically planned my destruction while accepting my love and financial support. Sarah faced federal charges for banking fraud and lost her career in financial services permanently, with additional civil liability for damages caused by her abuse of professional position and violation of federal regulations designed to protect elderly banking customers. Her case became a training example for bank employees about the serious consequences of participating in elder financial abuse schemes. The court ordered immediate return of my house and all stolen funds, with Derek and Amanda's assets seized to satisfy restitution requirements and cover the costs of their prosecution. The legal process revealed that they'd spent most of my stolen money on gambling, luxury purchases, and vacations, requiring them to liquidate their remaining possessions to begin repaying their debt to me. The most satisfying aspect of the legal resolution was the court's decision to award me temporary custody of Emma and Ethan while Derek and Amanda served their prison sentences. The children had been innocent victims of their parents' criminal behavior, and the court recognized that I could provide them with stable, loving care that prioritized their well-being over financial exploitation schemes. The protective order issued against Derek and Amanda prohibited them from contacting me directly or indirectly for 5 years following their release from prison, with specific provisions preventing them from involving other family members in attempts to manipulate or intimidate me. The order also required supervised visitation with their children, ensuring that Derek and Amanda couldn't use Emma and Ethan as weapons in future manipulation attempts. Frank Sullivan's investigation work had been so thorough that prosecutors used my case as a model for training law enforcement officers in recognizing and investigating family financial abuse cases. Frank's systematic approach to evidence gathering and his understanding of manipulation tactics used by financial predators provided other investigators with tools for helping elderly victims fight back against family exploitation. The community response to Derek's conviction included offers of support from neighbors, church members, and local organizations dedicated to protecting elderly residents from financial abuse and isolation. Rosa Rodriguez became my closest friend and daily companion, proving that genuine family relationships are built on mutual care and respect rather than blood relationships or legal obligations. My relationship with Emma and Ethan flourished once they were removed from the toxic environment Derek and Amanda had created, where criminal behavior was normalized and family love was conditional on financial benefits. The children quickly adapted to living with me in a new apartment I'd purchased using recovered assets, surrounded by stability and genuine affection rather than manipulation and exploitation. The therapeutic process of healing from Derek's betrayal involved extensive counseling to help me understand the warning signs I'd missed and develop strategies for protecting myself from future exploitation attempts. Learning about manipulation tactics used by financial predators helped me realize that Derek's crimes reflected his own moral failures rather than my naivety or trust in family relationships. Frank Sullivan's friendship evolved into a romantic relationship that provided me with companionship based on mutual respect and shared values rather than financial dependency or family obligation. Frank's understanding of criminal behavior and his protective instincts created a sense of security I hadn't experienced since my husband's death, proving that genuine love can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances. The financial recovery process restored not just my monetary assets but my confidence in my own judgment and ability to make independent decisions about my future. Reclaiming control over my finances and living situation demonstrated that age doesn't automatically diminish competence or justify surrendering autonomy to family members who claim to know what's best for elderly relatives. 1 year after Derek's conviction, I established a foundation dedicated to helping other elderly victims of family financial abuse, using my experience and resources to provide legal assistance, emotional support, and education about recognizing manipulation tactics used by predatory relatives. The foundation's work helped dozens of seniors fight back against exploitation and reclaim their independence from family members who'd betrayed their trust. The most meaningful aspect of my recovery was the relationship I rebuilt with Emma and Ethan, who learned through our daily interactions that genuine family love involves sacrifice, protection, and unconditional support rather than exploitation and manipulation. Watching them grow up in an environment free from criminal behavior and financial stress proved that Derek's actions had been choices rather than inevitable responses to desperate circumstances. Derek's attempts to maintain contact from prison were consistently rebuffed by my legal team and the court system, which recognized that any communication represented potential continuation of his manipulation and intimidation campaigns. His letters claiming remorse and requesting forgiveness were forwarded to prosecutors as evidence of ongoing attempts to manipulate his victim and avoid taking responsibility for his crimes. Amanda's supervised visits with Emma and Ethan were initially tense and uncomfortable, but gradually improved as she demonstrated genuine remorse for her actions and commitment to rebuilding her relationship with her children through honesty rather than manipulation. Her participation in prison counseling programs and her cooperation with restitution efforts suggested that she might eventually become a positive influence in her children's lives. 2 years have passed since that terrible morning when I stood in Derek's kitchen holding pieces of a broken plate while my son screamed at me with hatred I'd never imagined possible from my own child. Today, I'm sitting in my own apartment overlooking a beautiful garden where Emma and Ethan play safely while I reflect on a journey that transformed devastating betrayal into unexpected strength and genuine freedom. My new home is modest but entirely mine, purchased with money recovered through legal action and decorated with possessions chosen for comfort rather than monetary value. The kitchen holds new dishes that create happy memories rather than painful reminders, and every room reflects my personal choices rather than compromises forced by dependency on family members who viewed my presence as an inconvenience to be monetized. Emma and Ethan have thrived in an environment free from the toxic dynamics their parents created through criminal behavior and financial manipulation. At 4 years old, they understand that Grandma Margaret loves them unconditionally and that our home is a safe place where honesty and kindness matter more than money or power. Their laughter fills spaces that were once heavy with deception and fear. Frank Sullivan has become my partner in every sense that matters, providing companionship built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection rather than financial dependency or family obligation. Our relationship proves that love can emerge from the most unexpected circumstances and that trust can be rebuilt even after devastating betrayal by those we thought we knew best. The foundation I established to help elderly victims of family financial abuse has grown beyond my wildest expectations, providing legal assistance, emotional support, and educational resources to seniors throughout our state who are fighting back against exploitation by their own relatives. Our work has helped hundreds of elderly people reclaim their independence and prosecute family members who chose greed over genuine care. Derek remains in prison with 4 years left on his sentence, and his occasional letters attempting to manipulate sympathy or forgiveness are immediately forwarded to my legal team as evidence of ongoing harassment. His complete inability to accept responsibility for his crimes or acknowledge the devastating impact of his actions proves that his current incarceration is protecting other potential victims from his predatory behavior. Amanda's progress has been more encouraging as she's demonstrated genuine remorse for her participation in Derek's criminal enterprise and worked consistently to rebuild her relationship with Emma and Ethan through supervised visits focused on their well-being rather than her own needs. Her participation in prison counseling and her cooperation with restitution efforts suggest that she may eventually become a positive influence in her children's lives. The most important lesson I've learned is that age doesn't diminish our right to dignity, respect, and independence, regardless of what family members or society might suggest about elderly people's capacity for decision-making. Fighting back against Derek's exploitation required me to rediscover strength I didn't know I still possessed and to reject the narrative that seniors should be grateful for any attention from younger relatives, even when that attention comes with strings attached. I've learned to recognize the warning signs of financial manipulation and emotional abuse that I missed during Derek's initial approach, including excessive concern about my financial affairs, attempts to isolate me from friends and support systems, and gradual restrictions on my freedom disguised as protective care. Education about manipulation tactics has become my strongest defense against future exploitation attempts. The experience taught me that genuine family relationships are built on mutual respect, unconditional love, and shared sacrifice rather than blood relationships or legal obligations. Frank, Rosa, Emma, Ethan, and the friends I've made through advocacy work have become my real family because they've proven their loyalty through actions rather than words and have never attempted to monetize our relationships for personal gain. Financial security in retirement requires vigilance and protective strategies that go beyond traditional investment and savings advice. I've learned to maintain control over my own accounts, legal documents, and decision-making processes regardless of well-meaning offers of assistance from family members who might have hidden agendas or ulterior motives for becoming involved in my financial affairs. The most profound healing has come from helping other elderly victims find the courage to fight back against family exploitation and reclaim their independence from relatives who've betrayed their trust for financial gain. Each successful case our foundation handles proves that seniors have the right to live with dignity and freedom regardless of their age or the manipulative tactics used by predatory family members. My story demonstrates that survival and recovery are possible even after devastating betrayal by those we trust most, but healing requires courage to face difficult truths, willingness to fight for justice regardless of family pressure to remain silent, and determination to rebuild life on terms that prioritize our own well-being rather than maintaining relationships that have become toxic or destructive. Looking toward the future, I see possibilities that were unimaginable during those dark months when Derek's manipulation made me question my own sanity and worth. Emma and Ethan will grow up knowing that their grandmother fought for justice and refused to accept abuse, providing them with examples of strength and resilience that will serve them throughout their own lives. The broken plate that started this nightmare has been replaced by new dishes that create happy memories during family meals where love and laughter are genuine rather than performed for hidden agendas. Every meal shared with Emma, Ethan, and Frank represents a victory over those who tried to destroy my capacity for trust and joy. As I finish sharing this story, I want other seniors facing family exploitation to know that you're not alone, you're not powerless, and you deserve better treatment regardless of your age or family circumstances. Fighting back against financial abuse requires courage and support, but justice is possible and freedom is worth whatever effort it takes to reclaim your independence and dignity. The plate may have broken that day in Derek's kitchen, but my spirit proved to be much stronger than he anticipated. Sometimes the most beautiful mosaics are created from pieces that were once shattered, and my new life has been rebuilt with stronger foundations and more careful attention to the quality of relationships that truly matter. What would you do if you discovered your own family was systematically stealing from you while pretending to provide care and support? Have you noticed warning signs of financial manipulation in your own family relationships, or do you know someone who might be facing elder abuse? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if this story opened your eyes to the reality of family financial predators. Subscribe for more real-life stories that expose the truth about betrayal and the power of fighting back, and please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that age doesn't diminish our right to respect and independence. Thank you for joining me on this journey from victimization to victory, and remember that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and demand the treatment you deserve. Until next time, keep fighting for your rights and never let anyone convince you that you're too old to matter.